Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. Copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby of this conference room. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representative to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please write your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the lobby. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please sign in on that same sheet. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available in the lobby. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to district court.
First order of business is the approval of the January 9th, 2020 meeting. I'm showing members were absent was Shane Gross, Bob Duell, Joshua Blick, and Hugh Nix. Is there a motion on those minutes?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Green, second by Mr. Joe Johnson. Those in favor signify with the upraised hand. There's any opposition? Passes 7-0-4. Going to recess the Planning Commission meeting so that we can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We've got a couple of issues that need to be taken care of before we come back to the Planning Commission meeting. So we will recess that, and I will open the meeting for the Board of Zoning Appeals. First order of business is the minutes of January 9th, 2020. And again, the same 4 members were absent for that meeting.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Joe Johnson, a second by Mrs. Miles. Those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Those opposed, passes 7-0-4. Got 2 items to take a look at. We will see if we can take these by consent. First item, agenda item number 2, a city variance to permit illuminated sign and a sign greater than 15 foot tall near East 17th Street North and North Hillside Avenue. Is anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? See none. Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? See none, we'll take that by consent. Agenda item number 3 is a city variance to increase the number of permitted off-site signs on property located near East 37th Street North and North Woodland. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. That's the next item. So we need to hear item number 3, BZA 2019-00059. You got the floor, Dave.
Well, do you want to vote on your consent item first?
We'll do it. Good call.
Motion to approve. Consent item.
Got a motion by Mr. Blick, second by Mr. Who? Mr. Nix. All right. Bill Johnson. Those in favor, show with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously, 11-0. Now you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, BCA 2019-59 is a request for a variance concerning the placement of an off-site sign at the corner of 37th Street North and North Hillside. And that is presently, as you can see, the location is LC zoning at the northwest corner of that intersection. The aerial shows the building there, but if we go to the pictures, it's vacant. There is nothing on that property at this time. What is being requested, and this is here because of the fact that under the sign code, and I'm going to try my best to explain this, but the staff report talks about it. I think it's got to be 3,000 feet in a mile of commercial zoning to qualify for placement of an individual off-site sign. Most of the commercial, and it's measured in this case going north along Woodland. Most of the commercial, or most of the property is in the city of Bel Air, and that doesn't count. Although most of everything on that side in Bel Air is commercial. They're requesting the variance to allow the placement of an off-site sign on that corner as shown by their proposed site plan. They're proposing a monument or a sign that will be placed on the roof of a new building that is going to be built on that corner. This is the south elevation. So the commercial building will have a wall sign on it that faces the south side. This sign is going to be right above that. And the face of the sign will essentially be primarily seen from traffic going up and down Woodlawn. Now, obviously, if you're going along 37th Street and stopped at the stoplight, you're going to be able to see the sign. But that's the location. They're asking for a 300 square foot sign, which generally is permitted. We have recommended the sign be limited in size to 220 square feet, primarily because of the frontage and sign of the individual lot and the location. And they're also asking for the height of the sign. The zoning case that is associated with this, which you will take up as the Planning Commission, is what's called a special review under the sign code, which is the process that was established in the sign code that allows you, in that process, to allow the placement of the sign less than 300 feet away from residential property. And you've got the condominium unit to the east of the subject site that triggers that requirement for that to be reduced. So we've got two cases going on, but obviously we'll take this case first. So that's the substance of what this is all about. You've got your staff report that outlines all that, the reasons why we believe that it's appropriate to grant the variance with the proviso that we're recommending that the size of the sign be limited to 220 square feet, which is still within the standard of what is built within the sign industry, we understand, rather than the 300 square foot sign. I know the agent is here and I'm sure wants to address that issue. So with that, I'll pass it to you. I can show you some quick pictures just to show. This is looking east at the site. This is 37th Street looking east. I'm along Woodlawn, and this is the property in question. Just to the left of this, and I think I've got another picture to show it, is the Sonic that is right on the north. That's looking north from the site, and there you can see the Sonic. You can see some of the commercial properties on the other side of the street, the background. Those are in Bel Air, and those are all commercial properties. This is more taken in the site, and you can see this is the common line with the condominium units on the east side. You can see the size and intensity of the existing screening that exists along that common line to the east. This is kind of taking a view back against that whole common line, all the way from the south property line, which is at 37th Street North, all the way up to and really kind of beyond where the Sonic sits to the north. That's looking south from the site. We're looking south along Woodlawn. Here's the intersection, the Walgreens that sits on the southeast corner of that intersection. And this is looking west. Again, this is all Bel Air. On this side of the street, we have a bank and other office buildings. Going east and further east down are other commercial uses on further east on the north side in Bel Air. On the south side, this is the canopy over the gas facility that's on the north side of Dillon's, which occupies the property at the southwest corner of 37th and Woodlawn. That's looking north along Woodlawn. I'm actually further north, and you can see that you go north on this side, which is Bel Air. You have a number of businesses along the street. The Sonic is to the right. Then you have an office complex. Then you got another vacant lot that's for sale, and we're up in that area. So, questions for staff?
How about this? Okay, great. Several questions. Just so we understand, the definition of an off-site sign is a sign that's not going to advertise the business that's there. Is that
Correct.
correct?
It qualifies effectively as a billboard.
Okay.
It's a sign that is advertising other activities or events that are not on the same side of which the sign's located.
And the 3,000 feet of commercial, is that calculated based on both sides of the streets? Assuming this were all in the city of Wichita, is it one side of the street or both sides of the street?
That I don't know whether exactly. I'll let punt to Scott on that. But
It's either side of the street. So if it's on both sides, it only counts once. So it's 3,000 feet of commercial on either side. And that's of limited commercial to allow 2 signs within a mile, 1,500 to allow 1.
And so if this were all in the city, would it meet the 3,000 feet?
come pretty close.
We don't know the answer to that?
Well, we don't have access. I didn't look at the maps of the actual zoning categories of what's in Bel Air, but the aerials and all the uses show it's mostly commercial going north. Yes.
I don't know. I think it would come short of the 3,000. We didn't actually measure it, but I think it would come short of the 3,000. There's a pretty sizable piece of the residential in between. I think
So that would mean it would not be approved on its own, even if it were in the city of Wichita. This variance would be required.
It takes 1,500 linear feet to allow 1 sign, and we're certain there's at least 1,500 linear feet.
The next question, Dave, is if we approve this, are we also approving the height and the size of the sign, or is that taken up? I'm a little confused because we're talking about that in the zoning case as well. Which one governs?
Well, they both do, and they kind of are tied together. If you approve one and not the other, I think it probably becomes a difficult issue that they won't be able to issue the sign permit because the zoning review or the code review issue that's a zone case deals with distance away from residential, which is primarily to the east. The variance is also talking about the height. So,
And I assume that in the zoning case, we can put conditions on the sign in order for it to be approved, which might be different than what we approve here. That's my concern.
well, we would hope they would be consistent.
Yeah, but that's
So-
not my question.
know.
Are we approving a 300-foot sign if we approve this, or are we approving
We're
200
recommending a 220 square foot sign.
And that would be part of this approval.
Yes. That's the staff's recommendation.
Any additional questions, Mr. Richardson? Mr. Foster?
Dave, just clarification on that 220, is that for one side only, given this is a V-shaped double-face sign? How is that calculated?
I think it's measured,
That's each sign face would be 220.
Was that your question, Mr. Florence? No. Okay, go ahead.
Is this a digital, will this be a digital sign?
pardon me?
Will this be a digital sign?
We presume so. It's permitted by right.
Additional questions? If not, we'll go to the agent or applicant. State your name and address for the record, and you'll have 10 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, my name is Greg Ferris. I represent the applicant in this case. I'd like to clarify a couple things. First of all, Dave misspoke and Scott corrected just to make sure. You only need 1,500 linear feet of zoning to allow a sign in the city of Wichita. So if the property across the street was in the city of Wichita, there would be enough for 1,500 feet, and therefore it would be approved. So that's something I think needs to be clarified. The second question was in regard to the height. The height is really not something we're asking a variance for. The height will either be 25 feet, which is allowed by right, or the 40 feet if we build it after the building is constructed and it goes above the building. That is also allowed by right. That does not require a variance for the height. So what you're approving today is whether or not a sign would be allowed. I requested 300. We have no problem with the recommendation of staff, understand why they made the 220 feet. So really, you're not approving the height, you're approving a off-site sign of 220 feet per the code, and then the code would either allow it to be the 25 feet or if it was above the building. So if you build it before the building, it would be required to be 25 feet. If it was built after the building, then it would be actually required by the code to be above the building. So those are just to clarify a couple of the questions. Mr. Florence knows better than any of us, including myself, how complex the sign code is. I happen to disagree with the staff's position on this, on how they determined. And if you look at page 2, this is so complicated, I hope we can get through it and even understand it, because I'll be honest with you, I've only done about 50 of these and I'm not sure I understand it. But under number permitted is if you go down about halfway, it says a designated mile shall be the length of the center line, and then it goes on to talk about 520 feet. And it says any mile not completely within the city of Wichita shall be treated on a percentage basis. As I read that, I say, okay, this mile is not it's not a full mile in the city, so you treat that as a percentage of the 520 feet. And so if you carry that percentage over to the 1,500, you then would have enough zoning even without the Bel Air zoning. So if that's not complex enough, then you go on and you read the next sentence. It says the number of signs will be allowed in direct proportion to the percentage. So as I read that, when I went through the process, I go, well, it's allowed. As I met with JR, he says, no, that's not how we interpret it. Well, I could have then challenged the interpretation, come before you as a challenge the interpretation, or go through the BZA process. So if I'd have challenged and you then denied that, I'd have had to go through the BZA. I felt like it was just as easy and simple to go through the BZA process, which is what we're doing today. So as I look at this from the standpoint, I agree with the findings of staff and I also had my own findings listed as to why it meets the 5 criteria. I believe it does meet the 5 criteria of the BZA. I believe it does that because of the definition of why you talk about percentages and those things in the zoning code. So I think that based on all the information that this sign really isn't out of character with the area. It's all commercial. It would be allowed if the Bel Air was in the city of Wichita. It's only one sign. It's considerably smaller at 220 foot than would be allowed if that property on the other side was in the city of Wichita, because we would have then applied for a 300 square foot sign. It would have been approved because there would have been no question as to whether or not there was enough zoning. Having said all that, I know this is very complex, and it's probably easier for me to answer specific questions than to go through a lengthy presentation. I'd be glad to do that and make any other clarifications that you feel are important.
Any questions for Mr. Ferris? Mr. Richardson?
So Greg, what you just said, it all assumes that we would approve a variance of the 300 from residential.
I'm sorry, say that again, sir.
Well, what you said is this would be approved, right, in your opinion. I assume that's conditioned by whether or not we can provide a waiver for the 300 feet from residential.
Correct.
Thank you.
That would have been a totally different process. We would have not gone through the BZA. I'd have just gone for the waiver.
Mr. Foster?
Condition number 2 in the staff report notes that the requested signage shall not be constructed until the building over which the proposed off-site sign has been constructed. Does that mean we're talking about a 40-foot tall?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions?
And that, sir, is by code. That would not have been allowed. That's not really a variance, other than requiring that it not be built before and I forgot that you put that in there, Scott, and I don't have a problem with that because we're not going to build it until the building's done. The whole idea of building this sign is to offset the taxes that he's going to pay on a new building that he's constructing on that corner. It's going to be pretty expensive, and he thought, well, if he can figure out a way to offset some of those costs.
Additional questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'll stand by if you have any.
Is there
other
anybody from the audience who wishes to speak on this item? You would have 3 minutes. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Mr. Foster?
Just a staff question. Going forward, when we look at the other case, what if we decide that we only want the 25 foot and this needs to go up prior to the building? Is that part of discussion?
If you made that decision, then you probably would have to revisit the action you took on the variance if you didn't address that here, so.
Also, there might be let me think this through. I think you could make a condition on your approval of the BZA subject to any terms and conditions specified by the MAPC.
In effect, that would tie in whatever decision we made here would coincide with what we decide on the planning commission side. Mr. Dool?
Is this sign mounted on the top of the building? Is that the proposal, or is it on a post that's right next to the building?
It's on a pole that's next to the building.
Any additional questions? We have a motion?
I move to approve per staff comments.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Florence, second by Ms. Miles. That's to include that any conditions that are made as part of the planning commission will be attached to this agreement. That's satisfactory. Those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously, 12-0. I don't see any other information that we need to do for the BZA, so I will adjourn the BZA meeting and reopen the planning commission meeting. We will begin by seeing how many of these items we can take by consent. So we will start. Is there anybody in the commission wishes to hear item 2.1, a one-step final plat, Turkey Creek, 4th edition, near the north side of West Pawnee and the east side of 135th Street West? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take item 2.1 by consent. Item 2.2 has been deferred to February the 6th. Item 2.3 has been deferred to February the 6th. Item 2.4, one-step final plat, Sooner Boulevard addition near West 61st Street North and North 295th Street West. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take item 2.4 by consent. Agenda item 2.5, one-step final plat, Jerome and Jeff addition near West Zoo Boulevard and West Central Avenue. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Take item 2.5 by consent.
Motion to approve 2.1, 2.4, and 2.5.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Blick. I saw Mr. Nix's hand go up, so I will take that as the second. All those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Those items all pass unanimously, 12-0. Public hearing items. Vacation of 30-foot platted setback on multiple properties along Gentry, Bluff, and Fountain for future redevelopment. Located near East 17th Street and a half-mile west of North Hillside. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? You will take item 3.1 by consent. My mistake, I did not see that. We will hear item 3.1. Item 3.2, city vacation of a 20-foot building setback and vacation of platter's text to allow building of a neighborhood pool near East 37th Street North and North Greenwich Road. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take 3.2 by consent. Item 3.3, city vacation of portion of a platted utility easement to permit the construction of an in-ground pool along close to North Oliver Avenue and East 45th Street North. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Take item 3.3 by consent.
Motion to approve 3.2 and 3.3.
Have a motion by Mr. Blick, a second by Mr. Foster. Those in favor with the motion signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes 12-0. Public hearing items. Agenda item 4.1, city conditional use to permit a neighborhood swimming pool near North 37th Street East and the east of North Greenwich Road. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? We will take item 4.1 by consent. Item 4.2 has been deferred to the February 20th meeting. Item 4.3, city conditional use to permit vehicle and equipment sales on property near West McCormick Avenue and South Meridian Avenue. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? We have some questions. Okay, we will. Okay, next item is 4.4, city conditional use permit as an accessory apartment near North 119th Street West and West 21st Street North. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that item? Seeing none, anybody in the audience wish to hear that item? Yes. We will hear that item. Next item is 4.5, city zone change from MF 29 multifamily and SF5 single family to B multifamily for redevelopment on multiple properties along Yale, Harvard, Gentry, Bluff, and Fountain, generally located south of East 17th Street and within a half-mile east of North Hillside. Anybody on the commission wish to hear that item? We will hear that item. Next item, since that was tied to the BZA, we'll need to hear that, or do we take it by consent? Okay, item 4.6, city's sign code special review to permit an off-site billboard sign on the property near East 37th Street North and North Woodland Avenue. Anybody in the commission wish to hear that? We will hear that. Agenda item 4.7, city zone change from SF5 single-family residential to LC limited commercial property located near southeast corner of East 21st Street North and North Oliver. Anybody wish to hear that item? We will hear that item.
Motion to approve 4.1.
We have a motion by Mr. Blick, a second by Mr. Foster. All in favor of that motion signify with the upraised hand. That motion passes 13-0. Okay, our first item to hear is the vacation, agenda item 3.1. Who's going to be doing that? Philip, go right ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Philip Zievenbergen with planning staff. Vacation 2019-44 is a vacation request to vacate the 30-foot platted setback on multiple properties along Gentry, Bluff, and Fountain Streets or Fountain Avenues. The purpose of this vacation is to vacate the entire platted setback to allow the zoning setback to govern the site. As you saw in the agenda, it is associated with Zone 2019-52, which is a request to rezone what properties are in this area. They don't, the zoning case does not include or includes more properties than the vacation case does. The vacation case has a mix of zoning between SF5 single family and B multifamily. The zoning case, as it applies to these vacation areas, would change the single family zone lots to B multifamily. With the platted setback vacated, and if the zone change is approved to be multifamily, these properties would share a common setback of 20 feet instead of 30. An SF5 zone lot would have a 25-foot setback, so it's just a difference of 10 to 5 feet, depending on if you have the platted setback or the zoning setback on the single-family lots. The purpose of this vacation is to, like I said, allow the zoning setbacks to govern the site. As we'll talk about with the zoning case, it is inevitable that the applicant would like to redevelop these for multifamily purposes. The area within this the area of this neighborhood has seen and has continued seeing a lot of turnover and change, being in close proximity to the university. As we heard in the subdivision committee, Westar, or I guess Evergy, and Cox don't have any objections to this. They do have lines near the vacated setback areas, and they just always encourage that the applicant work with their area construction representatives to ensure that their lines are either out of the construction zone or that relocation is done at the applicant's expense. This was approved by or recommended approval by the subdivision committee 6-0 with one abstention, as one person did not hear this case prior to the voting happening. With that, I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for Philip? Seeing none, thank you. Would the agent or applicant like to come forward, please? State your name and address for the record, and you will have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Lindeback, MKC Engineering, 411 North Webb Road, on behalf of the owners and applicant. I think we heard a similar case to this last year. Many of you were on this commission when that occurred. The property owner has acquired additional properties and does anticipate at some point in time to redevelop these, and the setback would be necessary to vacate to follow their development model. If you've been in the neighborhood, The project that was approved last year is well underway and is under construction and should be open soon. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Brian? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the audience wish to speak on this item? If so, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes. Saying none, bring it back to the commission.
Move to approve for staff comments.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bill Johnson, second by Mr. Green. All those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously, 13-0. Yeah. Dave, before we start on that, we had some questions for staff. So, Mr. Blick, you want to start with your questions?
So Dave, I just had a question. I was looking at the site plan and I drove by it, and it used to be a bingo hall. So, and it looks like when I looked up GIS mapping on it, it showed that it had 3 properties that were before. So this, what they did they basically divide all 3 of those properties? So the bingo hall is not part of this. So it's just that corner lot. Is that basically
Well,
that's how the site plan looks? And it was kind of confusing.
And the lady that owns the bingo hall is here. They only own the property to the south. They apparently leased this property for parking once upon a time. The property was actually formerly owned by somebody in California. It's now changed hands, and the subject property for this case is not connected to the former bingo hall in any way at all.
Okay,
So-
and that's the same thing for the property, the other parking lot the bingo hall was using in the residential right there to the west. That is not part of
Separate
the
ownership. It's not part of this. And
That's what I figured. It was just confusing because that
Yeah.
hall's been abandoned, and so when the signs were placed, it looked like it was all of that property.
well, and you can see from the aerial, the subject property has actually been fenced off, which is an
Definitely.
issue we talk about in the staff report. So.
Sounds good. And then from what it reads in here, it says that they'll be taking that chain link fence down.
Yes.
And then putting a railing. So that's the only 2 questions I had on it.
Okay.
Okay, with the questions taken care of, we'll go back to see if we can take this by consent. Anybody else on the commission wish to hear this item? Anybody in the audience wish to hear this item?
Yep.
We have a hand, so we will hear
Yes.
this item.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
go Dave.
Real quickly, the subject property, this is the site plan that's proposed. I showed you the location. It's property zoned LC. The aerial photo shows the property in question. If you've been out there, it's just a vacant parking lot that currently has a chain link fence around the property. That the lady that owns the property to the south informed me yesterday. Yes, they used to lease this property, and it was part of the parking for the bingo hall operation when it was going. It's not going now. And a separate owner, and the new owner has got someone wanting to establish the car lot on the property. The site plan they provided, you got a copy of that in your staff report. They intended to leave the access points off of McCormick and off of Meridian. The site plan shows parking stalls for customers along the west side of the property. These building extensions, and I think that may be part of what the public wishes to talk about. She told me yesterday that when her and her husband had the operation of the bingo hall, they're the ones that built that over there. As best we can tell, it was not on their property, although they were leasing it. So that may be why they felt they could do that. But anyway, ownerships have changed. The intention is to remove at least the western structures that are on the north side of the old bingo parlor, but that is apparently on the subject lot. They will put a new 10 by 12 mobile building in to operate as the office for their proposed sales slot. And I noted there is some parking here along the west side. We've recommended approval, subject to giving us a detailed site plan, more particularly showing how they intend to have display of vehicles in this area, so we keep maintain circulation through, remove the chain link fence, primarily at least along the north and east side, replace that with more of a pipe fence that's typical with what we see with other car lots in other parts of the city. And it helps to make sure that the display of vehicles does not go off the property and get into the sidewalk, particularly as it exists surrounding the property. So quickly, that is the property. You can see here the colored buildings that are the structures on the north side of the bingo parlor that are discussed. And the other one is the awning that was built along the entrance on the north side of the bingo parlor. The property line, best we were able to tell, comes right along the edge of the building. So those appear to be encroaching across the property line, but we'd like to have a new site plan with a survey to confirm all that. This is the property looking west at the site. Here is the former bingo parlor. You can see the awning in question. Here's the fence that has been constructed. This is along the west side of Meridian. You can see back here is McCormick. This is what's across the street to the north is a convenience store right across the street north from the subject property. This is what's right across the street looking east. This is what's on the other side of Meridian. This is looking east along McCormick. This is the intersection with Meridian. This is looking west. You can see the next property across the alley is a single-family home with a large detached garage right off the alley. On the north side, there are some other single-family homes on the north side of McCormick. That's looking north along Meridian. You can actually see the overpass over Kellogg in the background. So be happy to answer questions.
Questions for Dave? Saying none, thank you. Agent or applicant like to come forward, please, and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 10 minutes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Benkole. I live at 2117 South Cranbrook, 67207. I do currently own a dealership in Wichita. It's called Car Nation, co-own over there at 1301 East Lincoln. I've just been looking for that spot I'm at right now is too small for me. I'm also a registered nurse. I work at Lake Point, Wichita. I only work on Wednesdays, 6 to 2. Take care of I just do geriatrics pretty much. But, the paycheck is not enough. So I got into the car business. I graduated from Bethel College in North Newton. But I've been doing this since 2011 pretty much. And but that little side I have at 1301 East Lincoln is just too small for me. And the city's been coming by and I've been telling my partners I need another location. Maybe I can just leave him over there and just migrate to the bingo, where that bingo building is. I do understand there's an existing structure in that property, which is that bingo building. I just want to be able to provide service to people. That's all I'm after. I have a good reputation. Like I said, I'm a registered nurse as well. Just display of cars. I have a mobile office that's coming from Newton to be delivered maybe next week or thereabout. And I do understand Mr. Dave said we need to take down the chain link, the fencing. I'll get to that. It's a work in progress right now. And I want to thank everybody here. I don't know what else to say.
Any
If you have any questions,
Any
let me
questions?
know.
Mr. Blick.
Question I have, I noticed the last 2 weeks you moved the cars off the lot that you had
Yes,
on
sir.
there.
Yeah.
You put them on the south side of the bingo hall. So in that area over there is not right now. So are they going to move those cars back? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, pretty much. Sometimes we have the cars at the detail shop, so they drop them off over there now. But every weekend I try to move them out. So I have another storage lot on North Broadway, way out on 35th Street, where I just dump all my cars for right now. But this business, you grow, and you just try to stay out of trouble. So that's why I just follow the rules. I move everything out. When I got the letter from when my agent told me about, I needed to zone that location, which that's what we're doing right now.
Mr. Foster?
Sir, at the northeast corner of the bingo hall, there's that, what looks to be an encroachment of the building. Is that to remain? And if so, do you have an understanding with the owner about that?
Yeah, it's not my, it's a lease. I don't pass my boundary. I'm just there to just do business. That's it. Whatever they want to do, whatever, I'm flexible. Life is too easy. If they say, hey, can we, whatever, the gates of that bingo, the doors of that bingo hall is chained lock right now. So if they ever decide to want to do bingo again, hey, whatever we can sit down to do, I'm open to.
Additional questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in the audience wish to speak on this item?
Don't want to say anything? No, apparently not.
Bring it back to the commission for action.
Move we approve per staff
Second.
comment.
Okay, motion by Mr. Green, a second by Mr. Blick. Any additional questions or comments? Those in favor signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously, 13-0. Next item is 4.4, conditional use permit for accessory apartment. Kathy?
Good afternoon, Kathy Morgan for the Planning Department. This property, as you can see, is located west of 119th Street on the north side of West 21st Street, single-family residential zoning. This has been a common application for the last year and a half. I can't remember how many times I've done an accessory structure within a residential zoned property. The applicant, let me back up, excuse me. This is, you can see the aerial here, the outside to the west of the pink line is Sedgwick County unincorporated area. It is within residential growth of the city. It also complies with the infill standards or process that we have in place. And so staff is recommending, according to our infill plan and what we have done with other single-family residential zoning parcels, that the request be approved per the 6 recommendations, which are typical, that the accessory structure has to remain under the same ownership, that they have to be in compliance with the approved site plan, the architecture and materials of the accessory structure shall be compatible with the main structure. Water and sewer have to be associated with the main structure, and then the appropriate permits issued. So I believe you have a site plan that's attached to your staff report. This is going to be attached to an existing building. So let me go through here's the site plan on the screen now. This is the existing house. This is looking directly west. This is the garage that the applicant wishes to attach the accessory structure. Another one looking back so you can kind of see the distance between the house and the corner of the accessory structure, and that does set back the garage, and the accessory structure will be about 20 feet behind the existing house. This is looking at the neighborhood, looking northeast from that north driveway of the subject property. This is looking east from the subject property. This is looking southeast along Cedar Crest, big lots. So staff is recommending approval of the accessory structure with the condition that we work out the materials and approve, the planning staff approve the materials for the accessory structure.
Questions for Kathy? Kathy, I've got a couple. Talk about the materials being like the existing properties. Is the garage of the similar to the house?
The garage is standing seam metal panels. And so what we had discussed was putting some kind of veneer brick wainscoting, maybe blending the color, the brick color of the house with the accessory structure. So we haven't worked out those details with the applicant at this point.
So that's part of the process, is making
That's
modifications
correct.
to the existing. Okay.
That's correct.
The other thing is is this the approved plan?
No, this is just the proposed plan.
Okay. And what I see here is a lot of open space. Don't want to see this turn into a 10-car parking lot. There'll be some limitations on how much of the driveway parking will be allowed between the secondary driveway that shows up and the existing driveway? Or is it going to stay the same as it is and not change? Is that a part of our conditions?
This is, it's not part of the condition, but this is the second driveway, and there's room for one more car space back there that it would be behind this chain link fence. So it's not going to become a.
Okay, my recommendation would be is that the approved site plan show the boundaries of the driveway.
Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you. Is the owner or agent for the owner available? Come forward and state your name and address for the record. You will have 10 minutes.
David, what would you like to have on the screen?
The site map would be great.
Okay. There you go. And you can just use this for the pointer.
Good afternoon. My name's David Ogden. I live at 2221 North Cedar Crest Drive. And basically, my parents live 8 houses down. So my dad passed away. They're in a big tri-level house. We want to get that down for my mom to a 1-level, get it manageable for her. And the most cost-effective way for us to do that is to just add on to what we already have. Now, that is a steel building that was there when I bought the property. And I guess with this application, I'm asking for a few waivers. First off, I'm building off of the side of that steel building and would like to use the same materials that was used in the construction of that building, so it looks the same. Nothing in the neighborhood looks different. It just looks a little larger. Nothing out of place. There's no wainscot or anything like that on my house because it's entirely brick. I did propose with Kathy that a wrap company here in town can do a wainscot brick pattern like on a vehicle wrap and do it wainscot level and give it that brick pattern. That would be semi-cost effective. The other request that I have is right about here, there is a second water well. So we're on private well and private sewage in this neighborhood. So the only city utilities that I have is electricity. Well, that garage has its own electric service already, did when I bought the property. So I'm asking to be able to use the water well that's put here, that's right now only used for lawn irrigation, and to put in a standalone septic system for the addition, because it's not going to require a very large system. And if I go digging, my current septic system is right in here, roughly. And then all the lateral lines come out this way. So if I dig all that up, then I have to double the size of everything. And that's just not going to be cost effective anymore. So we're just looking for solutions to get a safe place for my mom to be. Basically, that's what we're after. I think those were the only three considerations I'm asking: the water, the sewage, and then just being able to build with the same material that garage was built out of. Any questions?
Any questions for the speaker? Mr. Hartman.
So the existing garage is going to remain like it is?
That garage is going to stay just how it is. I'm just asking to come off the southeast corner and go south with it and just put in a living quarters along that long side of the shop. Yeah.
What kind of roof line are you looking at on that?
It's going to continue right off the current pitch.
And what is the, do you know the pitch of that?
I think it's a 212.
Okay, do you have any idea what the height of the wall will be?
On the finished end?
When you come out 30, it looks like 30 foot?
Probably about 10 feet.
Okay.
We're probably going to drop 2 feet. That's right about a 12-foot door, 14 probably to the peak of the building.
Okay.
And then as it slopes out, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foster.
Please explain why you'd have to double the lateral lines. Where's that information coming from?
Well, when I first started looking into this, the health and somebody department that deals with the sewage and things said that my existing septic system should have already failed 15 years ago. Because it's now, all of a sudden, it's too small for the house that it was built for. I don't know how that works, but that's what I'm told.
Thank you. Any other questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the audience who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Mr. Blick.
I have a question. He was talking about like a vinyl or wrap to use that on the building. Has that ever been done, or do you have any suggestions on that or not?
My suggestion is that if you want to do the vinyl wrap, you're better off just proving a garage that looks just like the garage that's there now.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, everybody knows what I stand on, but I think in this case, one of the things I would see that possibly if the same materials used, if it was in the same color to match the house and paint the face of the existing building so it all matches. It's been sitting there for a long time and apparently not been too bad, so that would be my suggestion.
From staff standpoint, our recommendation is coming to you from what the code says. Quite frankly, listening to this gentleman and what he's explaining, what he wants to do, I think it makes lots of sense to just extend that roof line, extend this existing metal building. It's not gonna have a negative impact on the neighborhood, in my opinion. The only issue with that is that it would be a waiver recommended by the planning commission of the zoning code, so it would require city council approval. It could not just stop here.
Do we have anything to say about the septic system, or is that?
We could, I think, probably just state that that we could recommend it if it was permitted by the city's health and environment. I mean, they're really the ones that get to approve those permits. And we could just say, we would recommend a waiver of that subject to their approval.
Mr. Foster?
And that would be for the water as well, similarly? Okay.
Mr. Richardson?
And we're not waiving that it's going to be under common ownership, so I don't see a problem with letting them use separate services if that's what it works. Because when he goes to get the building permit, he's going to have to wrestle with those issues.
Somebody ready to try to tackle a motion?
I move for approval with the stack recommendations plus all the extraneous things we just added.
Okay, so the question for staff is, do you have enough information to use that as a motion?
Yeah, as I understand it, it would be a modification of item number 3, which would allow the accessory dwelling to match the appearance of the existing garage. Water and sewer could be provided separately if it's approved by the Health and Environment section. And then Commissioner Warren's suggested that the site plan be revised to add the boundary of the driveway.
I'm gonna second that now that you have Joe's motion right.
So we have a motion and a second. Does most of the commission have a general idea of what we're agreeing? Okay, Green.
Did you want to include that the metal that's used would be the same color as the house, or just, and then paint the front of that garage, or just, that doesn't matter? Okay.
Okay, I think we have a motion. Staff satisfied with the motion? We can live with that. All those in favor of the motion signify with the upraised hand. Motion passes unanimously, 13-0. Next item is agenda item 4.5, the city zone changed from MF 29 multifamily to SF 5. Philip?
Just a correction, the properties are MF 29 and SF 5, and they're being rezoned to be multifamily. This is zone 2019-52. It's associated with the vacation case that we heard earlier today. As you can see on the map here, I'll point it out. The properties east of Gentry were subject to the vacation case. The properties to the west of Gentry were not part of the vacation case. All of them are part of the zoning case. You can see the properties to the east are primarily or to the west are primarily the MF 29 properties. That's the properties in green. Anything in the white are the single-family SF5 properties that are requesting to be rezoned. They're looking to be rezoned to be multifamily, which you can see here is the brown color that's kind of sparse through this portion of the neighborhood. You can see these properties are located south of 17th Street, east of Hillside. None of them go any further than south than 16th Street, and Fountain kind of acts as a dividing line between kind of more of the established neighborhood to the east as it continues that way. As we mentioned before with the vacation case, the purpose of this rezone is to allow for redevelopment of multifamily dwelling units. The properties in question are a mix between single-family homes and even larger and even smaller multifamily dwelling units. There's a few here on lots, especially on Yale Street, where they're small lots and they're technically multifamily units, but they look like small houses where they have a few apartments, maybe 3 or 4. They're not super tall multifamily dwellings. They actually are a little bit more in character with a single-family neighborhood in the multifamily area of the subject property. As I mentioned before, they front Yale, Harvard, Gentry, Bluff, and Fountain. During the subdivision, hearing for the vacation case, the applicant, or really the agent for the applicant, explained that though there are some single kind of one-off lots here, the intent is that over time, the applicant would be acquiring additional properties. They're just looking at basically working on rezoning those and taking care of the vacated setbacks along the way. Instead of waiting till they have them all and doing it all at once. I guess that's really up to their discretion on doing it now or waiting till later. As you can see, the surrounding neighborhood, anything north of 17th Street is the university. The university apparently has multiple zoning districts in it, anywhere from TF3 to MF29. The brown is B multifamily, and then the white is SF5 with the university overlay. The overlay basically gives the university the ability to do what they need to on their property to meet their own needs. Properties primarily to the west are B multifamily and limited commercial. That's what's in red over here. The primary zoning south of these properties and to the east is all SF5 single family. You have single family homes. And then this large rectangle here is Fairmount Park, as you can see in the aerial image here. Anything else here? Can work through some photos of the comprehensive plan identifies this area as residential and employment mix. It is within the established central area, which highly encourages infill development. It's area within this area that is identified as either being developed or redeveloped between up till 2035. Can work through some photos here, just a zoning exhibit from the applicant indicating again what the properties exactly are and their notification boundary that was sent out with the notices as required by law. What I did here, knowing the considerable number of properties, I basically took a few pictures per street to give you a general idea of what the neighborhood looks like. We're standing on 16th Street looking to the northwest. The subject properties along Yale are to our right-hand side, or my right-hand side, your left. You can see on the west side of Yale Street is a large apartment complex. It's potentially student housing. I know these properties over here are either fraternities or sororities with the university, so you have some higher density multifamily along Yale already. You can see here, these are some of the subject properties. As I mentioned before, they're not single family homes, but they're more situated like a single family dwelling, and they just have multiple apartments as they go deeper into the lot. You can see looking south along Yale, you can see those multifamily dwelling units, as I mentioned before. And then again, the student housing with the university, and behind that are some fraternity and sorority houses for the university as well. This is looking at Harvard. You can see this property is for rent, but it's a single family home. Harvard is more of a single family home street than it is apartments. You can see looking to the southeast, some of these are the subject properties. They're single family homes at this time, most likely rentals as they're owned by the rental company. This is looking north along Gentry. Again, much more of a single family home street on the west side anyway, and it has one property located on there. This development, which we actually have a better picture when we go, there he goes. Let me back up a little bit. So this is one half of the development that Mr. Lindback was talking about that was constructed earlier in the year at the intersection of Gentry and 17th Street. That apartment building is to our left. You can't see it in the site. This is a bar, and I think it's technically a non-conforming nightclub that's been allowed to stay along 17th and Gentry. Pardon me, I forgot what its name was. This is looking northeast along Yale. Again, you can see that apartment complex that is under construction. That is part of the previous case that was heard in 2019, where they did the same thing of vacating the setback as well as changing the zoning to allow for the construction of higher density multifamily. Again, the apartments under construction. To the east of that apartment complex is the associated parking. And then further south along Bluff Street are more single family homes. And then finally along Fountain kind of is the dividing line. On the east side of Fountain are, really both sides of Fountain are single family homes. The west side does have some rental properties. As you can see, there's 3 of them that are owned by the applicant. I'm unsure of the nature of what the east side is, but it's anything further east than Fountain is much more of an established single family neighborhood, anything west of Fountain starts having that mix of single-family, multifamily, renter, owner-occupied, definitely much more of the mixed bag with that. So another look down Fountain. Staff is recommending approval of this. Obviously, if the zoning does not change, these structures could remain as single-family homes and multifamily dwellings and could be rented out as they are now. If it is approved, it would then allow them to acquire more properties and potentially make larger, more dense multifamily dwelling units, as they kind of already are doing within the neighborhood. Obviously, the ones that are one-offs, they're probably going to be waiting until they can acquire more properties, because there's no point in really zoning to be multifamily if you don't have a larger tract of land to work with to do larger scale apartment complexes. And with that, I can stand for any staff questions.
Questions, Phil? Mr. Foster?
Philip, this concept of infill development has been talked about for quite a while, and even the committee that looked at it. One of the issues that comes up is off-street parking. And what will the B zoning require for off-street parking?
I don't recall off the top of my head. Scott, can you?
Yeah, actually, the parking requirement for multifamily is the same regardless of the zoning. So it's one per efficiency or one bedroom, and then 1.75 spaces for anything 2 bedroom or more for each unit.
I know in some cases where we've had a concern for the street type and the parking, we have required a minimum of 2. So I frankly would like to discuss that a little bit later.
Before I recognize Mr. Florence, I need to apologize. It seems like every time I turn around, I see somebody up here first, and he's quicker. One of these days, I'm going to call on you first, Mr. Florence, but the floor is yours now.
Hey, did the DAB board discuss this?
It has not been to DAB yet. It goes to DAB on February 3rd.
Additional questions for staff? Mr. Richardson?
In the meantime, before these are I want a lavalier. Yep, here we go again. Before these are redeveloped, what changes will this allow the owner to make? And my concern is that we really change the residential or single-family nature in the process. For example, will they be able to park in the front yard and those kinds of things? Again, I understand it's got to be paved, but is there a way that we can assure that these maintain that, if you will, single-family look before it's redeveloped? And I'm certainly sympathetic with what he's trying to do, but if we end up paving front yards, and I think some of the neighbors might think that's not a great idea. What does this allow him to do by way of multiple family with the setbacks and those kinds of things?
The setback is 20 feet for the front setback. It would allow a higher density, but there's a dwelling dwelling units per acre. So obviously, if it's a very small lot, you're not going to get that many dwelling units on it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, does B multifamily prohibit parking in the setback? Because I know in some commercial, like limited commercial, you can have parking within your setback. We can verify whether or not if they would be able to park in the setback or not. If not, then any property within the setback, you're not able to have parking anyway.
Yeah, the B multifamily does not allow the parking in the front setback, the required parking. It does allow ingress egress drives to parking.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So, for example, just to answer your question of some of these kind of further to the east that were single-family houses, that if the vacation was approved, reduces the setback to 20, these houses were built with a 30-foot setback, and now you have a 20-foot setback. You have 10 additional feet in there that could technically be allowed for parking because it's no longer in the setback and it is in front of the house.
And just Interesting comment on the way the code is written. There's actually greater provisions for accessory parking to be provided in the front setback for single family than there is for any other use. So actually, were it to be a multifamily use, it would be more restrictive than single family as it is zoned now.
So if that's the case, do we have the right to make a recommendation that change, that multifamily be the same as single family?
No, that would require a variance of the code to allow parking in the front setback. There is the ability to do an administrative adjustment for parking in the front setback, but it still requires an 8-foot setback of the parking area from the front property line.
Additional questions? Saying none, thank you, Philip. Agent or applicant, state your name and address for the record, and you have 10 minutes.
Good afternoon again. Brian Lindeback, MKC Engineering, on behalf of the owner and applicant. I think probably to start, we have plans to redevelop and continue to acquire property. Our client does. I'm trying to get back to the first sheet here in just a sec. There we go. Sorry, should be able to double click that. There we go. All right, we do intend to redevelop this property from Yale to Fountain. We can only develop what we own. Some of these properties are not owned by the owners of the development group. These ones you see in the dark black are recent. Well, some of them are not necessarily recent acquisitions, but some of them are in this other area over here. They will continue to purchase properties in the area as people are willing to sell. I think that's an important point to note. But we do have plans to redevelop this area, much like what we have done here recently. If we acquire properties and can fit that type of development onto there. Some of these properties off to the side, we don't have a big enough footprint to develop what we're proposing to do, and I'll show you the plans for that here in just a sec. But I think it's important to note that, more than likely, until more properties are acquired, these mid-block properties are not going to get redeveloped at this time. But that's not to say that we couldn't. It's just the practicality of how we are planning to redevelop in this area. So that kind of helps with some of the infill and the parking. I think that some of your questions are related to. This is in black. These items here, those are the subject parcels. I have this slide just to help show just how the extensive zoning in the area is compatible, and we're continuing to do that. The B multifamily is right next to MF 29 multifamily. The B multifamily just allows you to do a little bit more density and have the heights a little bit bigger. So we've done a lot of notification. There are about 17 to 18 signs in the neighborhood. So we've done a really extensive job and I'll go out and pick up all those signs here. But we have a neighborhood meeting planned, a private meeting with the people on the ownership list. These are all the ownership lists. We've also invited the association, the neighborhood association. And the point of that meeting is to get additional feedback of how we can partner with the community and be a good asset as we continue to pursue redevelopment. I think you may have seen this slide last year, but this is just a reiteration that in this area, there's just no new product. We're bringing on about 150 units with what you're about to see on this next slide. But we foresee a continued growth in that pattern. WSU is continuing to see more on-campus living, and they're also seeing about 60% retention rate for people wanting to stay near the campus throughout their college career. I think we've already acknowledged that this is in a conducive area for redevelopment. And they have a really good shuttle system, good ways to get around. Of course, WSU has additional parking nearby. We have good shuttle systems to other places in the community for those that don't have cars, which a lot of these students don't necessarily have cars. We did some analysis on the previous case and we had some adjustments to the parking code. We're not asking for those parking code adjustments right now because we haven't finalized our designs or thought processes. There's a plan for an additional pedestrian crossing in the near vicinity. And this is a bike route as well. So there's a lot of things just working in the favor. This is what's under construction right now. This is as if you're standing on 17th Street looking south, looking north towards the campus. This is 16th Street rather. As you can see, it is a fenced area. It has a secured parking, so all the parking is contained for these units on site. Oftentimes you see WSU students parking along the streets, but our tenants are going to be on site here. This is another elevation. As you see, what's being constructed. This is the existing building that's in the background. Here's just another slide looking south. This is off 17th here, looking south. Having a little amenity structure here at the front. So that's all. This is all what's in progress right now, and this is the sorts of things that we want to do in the future as far as continuing on. I think we're doing good things for this area and providing additional housing. I can share some numbers with you as far as the new housing that's out there. Right this fall, WSU had a record attendance, 16,058 students. It's continuing to grow. Shocker Hall has about 800 students. That was built in 2014. The Flats, these are on-campus new housing. The Flats was built in 2017. That houses about 320 students. The Suites that just is getting ready to open up, it has roughly about 400 students there. So that brings your number on campus to 1,520 roughly. Aspen Heights, which is another project that's nearby, it'll be built ready for 2020 as well, is our understanding. It has about 324 beds in there. So presently, this developer has 150 beds that we're looking, with this new project that they're bringing on, it'll expand that to 300 beds. In the future, we hope to bring additional beds and units. And these are market rate housing, so anybody can live there. It's not just students. There's 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom units. So there's lots of diversity there. Just one of the things that's helping to grow WSU is the expanded out-of-state folks that are coming in, and so that's been very helpful. But with that, I'll stand for any questions. I would like to also add that this development is locally owned and operated. 17th Management is a business that's part of High Plains Development that's leasing the properties, and again, it's all local investment, local ownership. It's going to continue that way.
Questions for Brian? Saying that, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody from the audience wish to speak on this item? If you so, come forward, state your name and address for the record, please, and you will have 3 minutes.
James Roseberry, 4518 Greenbrier, and I do have a question for the developer. I know they've done a lot in that neighborhood up there, Fairmont, trying to improve the safety. But how many more residents, new residents, would your apartment bring in? And when do you plan to meet with the neighborhood?
Okay, go ahead. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, one other question. You've already started to work on this already. And also, what are you going to do about safety, improving the safety up there? Because everybody know about Fairmont Park and you're right up against it. And so are you going to have security around your new building developments and that? And that's my concern for the neighborhood, since I don't see anybody here from it.
Hold up, Brian, and any other questions for the speaker? Let me go back. We got how many new residents, when we're going to meet with the neighborhood, and security around the new buildings? Those are your three main questions?
Three major questions, right?
Okay, we will get those questions answered shortly. Is there anybody else that wants to speak on this item? Okay, ma'am, if you come forward, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Denise Vital Caldwell, and I live on Fountain, and I happen to live on the other side of the street where they're not going to do any of the building, like the setback that he's talking about. Well, my question is, once I'm like him, once all that starts happening, it's going to be more people and more traffic, and but I trust in the Lord, so I feel safe. But my question is, who do I talk to about buying mine? Because I've been there for 30 years and I have no fear in leaving. So if anybody wants mine, I'm just saying, I ain't scared to go. So, and I don't know if it's him I talk to. Well, give me your card and your number. Hey, I see you.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else wish to speak on this issue? Okay, Brian, you got 2 minutes.
Just to kind of reiterate what the last speaker had to say, we are actively looking to purchase more properties in the area. My website doesn't show up here, but it's, Wichita Student Housing. There's a good, you can get all the phone numbers, but you can also just Google 17th Street and get a hold of Tyler. Tyler will help you on that. So that answers that question. Safety, we've done a lot with the facilities that are being built right now. And of course, in the area, we've got, well, doggone it, I think I passed it. There we go. We've got security cameras being installed on all the buildings. They've got some security folks that come by infrequently, but they haven't really had that much trouble with their current rentals. And again, I've got my colleague here, Tyler. He can help answer any of those questions specifically if you have any more questions about security. As far as the mix of when we build more units, I'm not sure when that will occur. It kind of has to do with the market and how the market's responding to with folks filling up these two buildings. But in time, we'll take on the next project, and I think you saw the parameters there of the neighborhood. We pursue that area for sure of all the ownerships that we have in our. But I think just safety. We're working on that. We're meeting with the neighborhood next Wednesday. We sent out postcards to everybody. We're meeting at the Fairmont Lodge or the community building there. We rented it out, and so we'll look to see as many faces we can get in touch with and talk a little bit about this project. So the meeting is at 7:00 next Wednesday.
How many new residents, based on the applications you're doing today, how many new residents do you anticipate?
It could be in that 300 realm, but until we actually start laying out the site and figuring everything out, it's kind of hard to say. But I would think we could certainly double what they have presently with some of the things that are or we could pursue.
Okay, and we've got the question of who will buy, so we've got that one taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the speaker, for the applicant? Mr. Foster?